And we're all live. Awesome. Good stuff. Right, let's do this. So anyone that's joined live, appreciate you committing some time to share what I hope is going to be, and I intend to be, a valuable conversation all around employee engagement and business. So by way of introduction, let's start with that. So my name's Chris Howe. I am a performance coach called Your Results Coach. And I focus, my coaching service focuses around business, leadership, and also lifestyle. So I'm looking to work with senior individuals, senior leaders, business owners, CEOs, and their leadership teams on ensuring that they are performing at their best, both in work and also out of work. So in short, that's me. I am joined in conversation today, and I'll introduce him probably, but Joe Morrison. So Joe, just introduce yourself, pal, so everyone knows who you are.
Hi there, Chris. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Joe. I'm founder of a company called Cheer at Work, and there's a lot of crossover in terms of what I offer and the kind of people I speak to as Chris. But in short, I help employees engage, attract, and retain their talent. So I do that through EVP, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point, and workshops that really make a difference to the employees. So the idea is to leverage what people love at work and fix what they don't.
Awesome. I hope your Vegas thing comes out in this conversation.
I'm sure we'll talk about Vegas. We'll talk about Vegas. I'm sure.
There you go. So if that's going to keep you listening, nothing will. There you go. Right. So now my own background in recruitment, there's just two ways I always look at employee engagement. This has always been a massively hot topic when it came to engaging a humongous temporary list, hundreds and thousands of temporary workers. Now, today's conversation, of course, is very specific and focused around staff and team rather than that sort of pool. However, the reason I mention that is, and it's a statement I'll use quite a lot, is the Achilles heel of every business is going to be attrition. If you could have, so there's two things to this. If you've got a churn of people, and I was speaking to someone the other day that had a churn in their finance team and it caused a considerable problem and bottleneck in the back office side of their business, and it took them quite a bit of time to recover. But the cost in lost productivity, lack of growth, things falling to the net, having to, accuracy, whatever it's going to be, particularly costly. So this actually is a topic quite close to my heart. And I think because of, obviously within my own service, you've got the leadership side of things, the people side of things. When you reached out to me, Joe, to talk about this, this is a good one. This is a very, very good topic for us to get into. So to start, let's map out let's think about the good, the bad, and the indifferent. So when we talk about employee engagement from your own perspective, what does that mean?
Oh, do you know, I'll weirdly not answer your question and go with the way I look at disengaged, because we hear a lot about employee engagement, and we'll get into the kind of background of that and where that come from. But what I think resonates with most people who probably be listening is disengaged employees. So I explain my definition. So typically they're people who are lacking in motivation, enthusiasm, and commitment to their role. Now, that's the alarmist definition. Actually, when you break down disengaged and what that means, it's not necessarily that the people at work are bad or they're disruptive or they're causing problems at work. You call them actively disengaged, and we can define that as well. But these are pretty much most of the workforce today. So I will be alarmist, and there's a stat that says 90% of the UK workforce are disengaged. That's done from a Gallup survey. But it makes sense, because on the flip side of that, there's a stat that shows that only 12% of UK, this is SMEs, so rather than large companies, it's SMEs, but only 12% are actually prioritizing any kind of engagement strategy. Now, why I talk about disengaged first is because that's, as you rightly put, it's what costs a business, and it's the problem that we're facing business. I'm stat heavy for this one, Chris, but the cost is on average it's £10,000 per employee per year in lost productivity from disengaged employees. So if you run a business and say you've got 100 people, I use the analogy of a boat. So you've got 100 people on your boat, these stats are saying that there's typically one person at the front who's going full lever, fully committed, fully engaged. So that's the person who's you say the employee who's engaged. And they're typically the people driving your business forward. Now, I will stress that employee engagement isn't the same as performance. They're very interlinked, but they're not the same. So an engaged person isn't necessarily the highest performer, but there's a lot of links to suggest that they usually are in that region. So you've got engaged people. Yeah. Then you've got 8 people on the boat who are what you call disengaged. And there's different variations of disengaged, which I'm sure we'll go through. And then you've typically got one person who's facing the other way at the back of the boat. Now, everyone else is going forward, so they often don't see that person at the back of the boat. But they're typically the person who leaves you the bad Glassdoor review when they leave. Often you don't know who they are because, again, you're focused on your goals and going forward. But why I find that particularly upsetting is not just from an employer perspective, where, of course, it's going to slow everybody down, but actually for that person in the back of the boat who's first facing the other way, how difficult it's going to be for that person, how upsetting it might be, how it's going to be really hard to work in that environment. And often they don't have a way out, or they don't have a way to communicate with a business that this is how they feel. And there's a huge disconnect between the employer and employee that happens because of that. So long way of talking about engaged, but that's why I start with the disengaged, because it often reveals, okay, what businesses typically find, or the challenges business find with their people.
It's interesting. So when we think, right, so I've got something, and I know I've said this to you before, and I've said this a lot in my own career, is that when we look at disengagement, and then which then trips into attrition, people leaving a business, it's not, that cost isn't necessarily a P&L item, it's almost like, it's a little bit like a return on investment for marketing, it's sort of like, it's a little bit there. And that 10 grand that you've mentioned per head will obviously be a rule of thumb across the SMEs in the UK, in the UK. It'll vary slightly dependent on type of person, skills, role,
salary, all of those things.
Yeah, all that stuff. But that's by the by. But I think that's one of the things is sometimes if the true cost could be an in and out itemized cost on a P&L, I do believe that some of the business leaders and business owners that don't necessarily focus enough on disengagement and levers would probably pay more attention. So okay. So we've got the boat analogy. We've got the guy looking the other way at the back, disinterested, disengaged. What are we going to see? What do we see? What traits do we see in that person? Because I think it'd be helpful for people to understand, okay, so if I've got someone disengaged, what are the sort of things I'm going to see? What am I going to be seeing out in the business?
Oh, there's loads of different types. There's some terms that have been researched as well. So there's a type called the hamsters and the honeymooners. I don't know if you heard that one. So the hamsters, a bit different this one. Hamsters are people who, and you might recognize this as an employee who might be listening as well, but typically you're spinning your wheels. So that's the hamster terminology. You're spinning your wheels and you think, why am I doing this? So you feel overworked, you feel frustrated because you're jumping on that hamster wheel every day and you're not really sure why you're doing it. So that's what you'll often find if somebody's in that position, that they'll talk about it. So they'll say, I feel undervalued. I feel like I'm working too hard. Or it might be more recognizable in the form of burnout, or the new term that people are using, quiet cracking, which is essentially talking about people's well-being. And it can be quite a visible thing, or worse, it could be you don't hear anything at all, or you don't notice it. And that's where I try to understand where people might not be heard or might not be showing those signs to help them say, well, actually, it's okay to show a bit of vulnerability and say, this isn't right. So there's that. Some people then are the more actively disengaged. They are usually the loudest. So they might complain, maybe not about the reason why they're disengaged, but hygiene factors. Mm-hmm. So the people who say the free fruit isn't that good, or I don't like the dress code all of a sudden, and that wasn't a problem for them before. It's like, well, okay, what's the real problem here? Because not everybody likes a dress code, especially in 2025. But why? So where is that coming from? Why are you talking about these hygiene factors at this point? And you can often see it in productivity as well, because you often find that, I didn't mention the honeymooners, so the people who first join a company who are they're excited.
Yeah.
I mean, they might not fully understand the mission and what they're doing, but they're new and excited and fresh. So in that honeymoon phase, but there still might be that underlying thing where they're not completely engaged, or they might not get there. And because they're new, they're not sure of the lay of the land, and should they talk about these things and bring these things to a surface. But in those instances, productivity is high. So after that honeymoon, if that productivity drops, you think, oh, hang on a minute here, this person was engaged. What's changed? So then productivity rather than output. So input rather than output is typically where you see that change.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got the profile of someone that may be disengaged. I want to try and lean into. So anyone that's listening to this in a leadership role that recognizes that engaging their people the best they possibly can is going to bring the best value. I suppose I want to start thinking about leadership traits and leadership qualities that can either help or maybe, contribute towards this particular topic. So what would you be seeing? Let's stay on the disengaged for the time being. What type of leader is going to end up with a disengaged team? What sort of trait? I know the sort of things I'd be thinking of here, and I'm going to go off a little bit of experience. So you've got the tyrant, the person that's maybe going to be the I'm going to tell you what to do and do as I say and not as I do. I've worked. I'm going back a long time, so I'm drawing on some. As you grow your career, you work with some great people, and then you'll work for people where you're thinking, I actually wouldn't do it like that, and you learn from maybe the way that you didn't enjoy being engaged and managed. Yeah. So I had somebody that could talk the talk and could get me to go and walk the walk, but never seemed to do it themselves, talked at you, didn't listen, told you what to do, watching, micromanaging, pecking at issues and not necessarily limited communication, one-to-ones and structured appraisals and PDPs missing, praise. Like, I'm going to open up. I'm a bit of a people pleaser, me, to be honest. And I know why this is, but like a little bit of validation. I'm not going to lie. That's just the way I'm built. Probably the reason why I do the work that I do now, because I love to help people and I sort of get the reverse praise when you've done a great job and someone's got results. But just a thank you, a well done, a praise. Come over here, let me have a quick chat. You did a great job there. Fantastic piece of work, whatever it's going to be. So there's some things in there that I would say have contributed to me feeling a little bit flat, low and disengaged. But equally, a lot of good things that when they happen would keep, speaking personally, and I think for a lot of people, just having some form of personal recognition, I think goes a long way. So if we think from a leadership perspective, then Joe, so let's start. I've given some of my own experiences there. So if we're going to think, so someone's listening now and wants to, okay, well, I'll reflect. I'm mature enough to take some time to reflect on my own leadership qualities and management skills. But if they needed to think about areas to focus on, where would you point them? What direction would you point them in?
Oh, well, look, I think they're halfway there by even having the maturity to reflect and think like that. So that's superb. But I always, and you mentioned this when you were going through that list, I always look at communication as the number one way of changing things. And when I say communicate, it's, as leaders, we often pick up habits because of what you said. So because of our experiences, because of how we like to be managed or how we don't like to be managed, and think that that's what our employees want. And because we learned it a certain way, that our employees are going to love that. Well, for me, actually, it's you can always forget all of that and just sit down and talk to the employees. So listen to what works for them. Because for some people, you're right. For some people, it's recognition. I'm very similar to you in that regard, Chris. It's like the pat on the head and the gold star.
That's it.
Yeah, look, put a chart on the wall with stickers. So that's my kind of thing. But that says more about my childlike approach to work. But it's like, for some people, they don't want that. They don't want the public praise and the affirmations. They just want the reward or the recognition comes in a completely different way. Like we had actually, we're leading to this Vegas story, but we had an editorial team in a previous company I worked for and a sales team. We had other teams, but for this purpose of this. Sales team are very good at the public, in all hands, talking about how great things were, sharing each other's stories and getting out in front and saying, this is how we're good. Wasn't always extrovert, introvert. They're salespeople. They're typically good at that. Whereas the editorial team would complain they didn't get that recognition. They didn't get that, but also they wouldn't be the people who are comfortable going for that praise or asking for it or giving that praise to each other. Now, that's not a fault on them. I don't think it's a introvert, extrovert. We could probably go down that route, but we'll get lost down there, I think. But equally, it's different people want different things, is the point I'm getting at. And we could assume as leaders that sales like it this way and editorial like it that way because of what we would see. But actually, you'd sit down with a salesperson and actually they have a lot more of the traits with editorial, what you would assume, and vice versa. So when you actually sit down and speak to them, understand what's important to them or how can we improve, employees give you that information if you sit down and take the time to speak to them. Now, you don't always like the information. You might always disagree with the information that you get. But that's the point. You're engaging with them. You're taking the time to understand them. And I'll use that story now because everyone's dying to hear the Vegas story. But there was an exit interview I did many years ago with an editor who was one of those who were talking about the sales team got this, the sales team got that, commission, all the benefits. They were getting trips to Vegas was the thing that really rang with them when they were leaving. And in the exit interview, I said, well, would you like to have gone to Vegas? Is that something you wish you could have done in your time? I said, no, absolutely not. Couldn't think of anything worse, Joe. They was the worst thing ever. But it led me to ask the question, well, what's your Vegas? Now, that question hadn't been asked to this employee and they didn't have an answer. And the annoying thing is we're asking this question at an exit interview, which meant we didn't have that answer either. Because if we spent time with that employee and asked them what their Vegas was 6 months, 9 months, 12 months before, we might not have been sitting in that exit interview. Now, I take that as a failing of me, to my own reflection. It's like, well, why are we waiting to an exit interview to have this conversation with a talented employee who's leaving the organization? And now we talk about the different types of disengage. I coin a phrase. I'm writing a book at the moment, plug, even though it's not out. But it's potentially called Watch Your Vegas for this reason. But it's I call it the fulfillment void, because it's not quite silent quitting. This was somebody who was working really hard, doing all of the right things. They were productive. They were a high performer, but they were disengaged. And that's why I always say performance and engagement are separate. But they were unfulfilled and they didn't know why. So they would look over their shoulder and look at what other people were doing rather than someone sitting down with them and thinking, well, what's important for me? What's going to make a difference? Why do I work? Now, they made the right decision. So they joined the company and I kept in touch with them. They do really well. But why did we let it get to that point when actually a couple of conversations, communication with this person would have made a big difference?
That's a shame. There's a question. I was my cursor was over, so I didn't see. So I'll just show it on the screen in a sec, so we can just give some feedback. I love that. Watch Your Vegas. When you told me that, if you're going to write it, it's got to be called that.
It has to be. Right.
There is no other choice, not at all.
But we'll finish it one day.
Yeah. But what a great example and story for us to start thinking. So if I position this thinking from a leadership perspective, I'm going to be brutally honest. If that happened to me, I'd be mortified. I'd be gutted. I'd be embarrassed. Thinking how can I not know that this individual that isn't their thing? Now, if it's a direct report for me, I'd be beating myself up considerably. And I honestly do not believe that I would do that based on my own experiences. But I suppose if there's a little bit more distance, I don't know, they're a report or two away from you, then I guess there's some analysis, there's some investigation and digging to do around the middle management and leadership team. I'm talking somebody who could be a big employer, a lot of people. Actually, this is, engagement gets even more difficult. Obviously, the more people that are involved and the more layers of management that get involved as well. And from my perspective, it has to be driven from the top. Let me just ask this question because it goes back to an earlier part of the conversations from Gordon Biswell. Gordon, thank you for your question. Out of curiosity, where did the facts and figures come from for the financial costs on disengagement? Really interested by the stat of 10k. So we rattled around that, mate. So it'd be an average figure, of course. But what was the source of that, please?
The 10k is, let me get my notes because I'm not going to make it up. CB benefits that talk about the 10k. The 90% of the UK workforce disengaged. That's Gallup, who equally talk about the 12% of SMEs are prioritising only 12% prioritising strategies. There's another one, and I'll use their source as employee benefits. They're called Employee Benefits, the organisation. They did a survey that looked at actually only about 32% of managers who they surveyed actually understand the term employee engagement as well. But I've got loads of these. There's another one they didn't even use, but £15 billion is spent on benefits that don't resonate. So we talk about like the impact or the financial impact of not knowing what's important to employees. That one's a YouGov ISEO survey. Now I will say, because somebody's asked as well, Gallup in particular are great and not so great at these. They're great in terms of they have a wealth of data to use, but I will caveat they have their own agenda with some of these stats as well, and I will point that out. Probably won't get to work with Gallup ever again, but they're employee engagement specialists who this is their some of these stats. I'm not disputing them. They've got this information, but there's a sort of sometimes an angle of questions that lead you down to stats like that. But equally, if it was 10% of the UK's workforce are disengaged, I'd say that's a problem. And if it cost £1,000 rather than £10,000 employee, I'd call that a problem too. So, but I will caveat that. Yeah.
No worries, mate. No worries. Well, look, I think so thanks for the question, Gordon. I hope that's answered. I hope that has answered it. If not, you can always float a message back either on here or directly. But thanks for that. Anyone else has got questions, you can just put them in the comments and we'll answer them as well. So all good. Okay. So we now. What I'd quite like to concentrate on now and start considering is, so if I think about good quality engagement, we've already talked about communication, and I think that's quite a considerable part of effective engagement of people. Actually listening, understanding, knowing, and learning about people, not just on a superficial work rate perspective and how they do their job, but as individuals. When it comes to, like staff parties and things like that, I've seen some really good practice now where there's a lot of effort from businesses canvassing opinion. Okay, so food allergies is an obvious one now.
Yeah.
Drink preferences, what they do and don't want to drink. Events, activities, all those sort of things, really. So what else, in your opinion, contributes towards positive employee engagement?
It's gonna sound like a woolly answer, but I will give some context. To me, it's different for everybody, and I always say there's 7 pillars of engaged employees, or of EVP, which again we'll talk about. So for me, it's brand and purpose, culture, environment, monetary reward, prospects, relationships, and well-being. If you talk to other EVP specialists, engagement specialists, or people in this space, some might say there's only 3 pillars, and 2 of those. Different people have different perspectives. My view is there's 7. And within those 7 pillars, you'll have 15, 20, maybe 30 different things that engage people and disengage. So for culture, it could be, are we in a respectful environment? It could be the team nights out. It could be the company nights out. It could be what social impact we have. It could be a variety of things. Environment could be as simple as the office environment versus the work environment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, why I say this is because I think it can be free fruit. It can be pizza Fridays. It could be getting the best out of yourself, developing yourself, recognition. Now, I've got into many debates online, probably too many, while trying to set up a business, but about you being able to have both. So you can have the perks and the Pizza Fridays, as well as a great culture, great environment for people to thrive in. And often people say you can't because or free pizzas, masks, all the problems that are going on with a business. Don't get me wrong, I think it happens. But for me, what engages, understanding what engage employees, you only really find out from speaking to them. Now, again, you can go into stats and research on this. You typically find it is that people are looking for purpose in their role. Particularly in 2025, they're looking for more flexibility in terms of work and life. More autonomy is what people are looking for, and a great manager. Salary's up there too. Let's not pretend it's not, but these are typically the things you'll find in any kind of engagement surveys or when you speak to employees. These are what typically score higher in these. But again, I'll defend free fruit. I'll defend Pizza Fridays, and I'll tell you why Pizza Fridays in particular. At a previous company I worked for, there's a guy called Mario. If he's listening, he won't mind me saying this. He hated Pizza Express. He's an Italian guy. He says it's not pizza, it's dough with toppings. He would say like just balk at it. Now, this was a senior person in the business. But what we do, instead of Pizza Fridays, we get pizza and see if Mario liked the pizza. So we'd have different pizzas from different places. And it turned what was quite a lightweight perk that we offer into something where, well, actually it becomes an event in the office, brings people together, gets people in the office because a return to office mandate, but gets people in front of a senior leader of the business because they probably wouldn't have a reason to go and speak to Mario. But this is an opportunity to get in front of somebody and have a conversation, albeit about pizza. But you have an opportunity to build better relationships and do all of those other things. So that's why what I say is with the right context, any reason to engage can make a big difference to an individual. And again, it still is a bit of a woolly answer because of what typically engages, but it could be anything, but it depends on why for me.
Yeah. Now, I was personally, I've never been a huge fan of all the sort of the free food giveaways, but actually what I have realised from facts and stats is anything that involves food generally people really like. So be it. So I have to be challenged there and stop being such a miserable mod.
Or not, but you don't have to. But that's the point. That's the difference. Like it's not your preference. Yours is more like recognition, as you said. And that's why I say it's different to people. When I do EVP workshops, and again, we haven't spoken about it still, but I one of the first questions I lay out those 7 pillars, and I go around the room and say, well, which one's the most important to you?
Yes.
And we go around, and nearly always you get pretty much most of the pillars answered. But that's the point. It's like we're all motivated by different things, and we all find different things important. Yeah. For people to hear that in a group session really helps as well.
Yeah, I think that I'm thinking out loud now in terms of people that I've managed before, and even my own experiences. And I think there's another way that I'm thinking of how to engage people. I worked for someone many moons ago, and they knew how to push my buttons. I don't like being told what to do. I don't respond well to that sort of style. But they had a way of pushing my buttons that really, really got my determination, my drive, and my I'm going to prove you wrong attitude out. So I would it was slightly stressful, but I was working in a high pressurized environment. I was a director in a business, and they knew how to push me to get me in that real determined, I'll show you sort of mindset. Fine line to tread, but I think where you're in a position maybe where you've got people in a sales environment, people that are driving a business, financial responsibility, aggressive targets and objectives and goals and that sort of thing, there's a high likelihood that the way that they need to be engaged, and I know you're saying that there can be a disassociation with engagement and performance. Someone can still perform, I'll just not be particularly engaged, but I think the two can marry up together where actually if they are engaged and they can perform, the likelihood is they can perform even better, So I think there's probably ways and means as a leader of being able to communicate, deal with, lead, and manage somebody to get the absolute best out of them. by keeping them engaged and also performing better. But of course, not everyone is in that sort of role. You've got support staff, back office staff, your editorial team, as you mentioned in a previous example, who are a different makeup. They're not going to get they've not got any financial objectives or targets. They're not there to grow the business, and therefore a completely different approach is needed. So, mate, let's move on to EVP, because you mentioned it 2 or 3 times now. I feel like now is the appropriate time for us to evolve into that, because it's a core piece of your work, isn't it? This in terms of what Cheer Up Work does. Yeah. So let's get into it, mate. What's the process loop like? You've already kicked off and said you start with your 7 pillars, and so let's consider now how people can practically, overview this without, unless they want some specialist support from people like you. How can they practically look at this now and have a little bit of an approach in terms of improving their employee engagement using EVP?
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to go through that. Of course, I'd expect you to come to me and speak to me to implement it. But
100%,
yeah, of course, that's what, but you don't have to. Yeah, it can be done fairly in straightforward or smaller groups. But in short, it's called employee value proposition. So for anyone who doesn't know, it started as an employer branding technique, and it's still used to attract talent. So it's in short, it's the balance of reward and benefits for the work somebody puts in. So what do I get out of work? And then what companies do is use that to attract talent. So an employee value proposition is often like a marketing slogan that ends up on a careers website. So come and work for us because we are passionate people who, whatever it might be. But where I've found it really useful is more from employee engagement. So I've done this in the previous 2 companies. It's the core of what I do as a business. But in one company, we predicted the next 7 leavers by running this exercise and why they were going to leave. Now, obviously, that's terrible because we implemented the EVP, we didn't follow it up, and we didn't stop those 7 people leaving. But when you do it effectively, which is what I'd recommend and how we can teach you how to do that, it helps. It stops that from happening. Or if it is going to happen, you know when it's going to happen and why, and you know what you might be able to do about it. And it's a real good diagnostics piece. So answering your question, great session to do first is with leaders. So to get them understanding what it's all about and what engagement is. So some of the things we speak about with leaders, explain those 7 pillars, get them in a room together and go, okay, what do we offer within those 7 pillars? So firstly, it reveals to leaders, do you know what we offer as a business? So are you uncovering the things that we offer to talent? If they don't, it's a great opportunity to learn, because they're the kind of levers they can pull when they're trying to attract someone or trying to help somebody who might want a promotion and they can't offer that promotion today. So we get a comprehensive list. So again, you can do that with 1 or 2 of your leaders. You could do that as a chief people officer or even as a CEO. You can sit down, get your 7 pillars, brand, culture, etc., and figure out what do you actually offer as a business.
Yeah.
Don't worry at that point if it's good or not. So if you offer one-to-one meetings with a manager, some people might say that's not a reward and that's not why people come to work. Put it down anyway, because the amount of people who said, I haven't had a one-to-one with my manager for 3 months and leave a business because they haven't had that interaction shows that actually it is a reason why people come to work. So performance reviews go in there. Office location. Can you keep pets in the office? Healthcare insurance. All of those things go in this list. The second part of this exercise is then, if you're limited in time and resource, you can do this with a small focus group. Pick people who might be engaged, who you think are disengaged, senior people, junior people, marketing, finance, sales. Get a cross section of your business. If you can do this with everybody, great. But you ask them just 2 questions with all of these offerings. So you ask them, how good is this offering? And then how important is this offering? Now, what you're probably hearing already is it's starting to sound a bit like an engagement survey where you fill in a form online anonymously. I don't like anonymous surveys. You can probe me on that if you like. This is an opportunity to sit down with people and have this conversation and understand those 2 questions. So what's good here and how important are these things that are good? Now, often what you find is you understand that people love free fruit, and they'll say it's really good if you've got free fruit, or if you've got a pizza Friday. No one complains about those sort of things. But if you're asking how important they are, if you're saying 10 is the most important and 1 is the least, you'll find that free fruit might be a 2 or a 3 out of 10 compared to training, development, progression, all of those kind of things. So you can literally map this out on a grid. So you can say, well, my manager relationship is 10 for important, but 5 for how good it is. And you can start to map these out. And your EVP ends up being what's in the top right-hand corner of that grid. So I wish I had a kind of visual I could display on here. I should have got one ready, but that's your EVP. So that's what you're really good at, and that's what your employees value the most. So if you're trying to attract talent, you can say, this is what our employees say is why we work in this organization and what we're doing great. So you shout that from the rooftops. What it also reveals is what's important and not good. So that'll be in the grid, the bottom right-hand corner. But that's your employees telling you that this is really valuable to me and I'm not getting this in the place that I work. So if it is job security in a company that's seeing a lot of change, and they're saying it's really important to have a secure job for me, that's 10 for important, but I feel really insecure in my job and I'm a 1 out of 10 for that. And you can say, well, actually, we could do some communication here and say, well, it's like this change happening, but it's all positive change. Or if that person is at risk, have a more adult and open conversation because you're getting that information, you're getting that data. And what I do with employees is it's great. I actually print cards off and do this as a visual exercise as well as more of a survey approach. But you can literally pick up the cards and go, this is why you work here. These are the things we're going to work on. And then anything else on the left-hand side, so if it's low in importance, don't worry about it. What you tend to find there is you get people who might have said, I don't like the dress code, go, well, actually, it's not that important to me. I don't mind coming in to work in the clothes they asked me to work or a uniform because it's not that important. What is important to me is X, Y, Z. Again, you can do that in a very down and dirty way. You can get that information in different formats. I go for the full, turn this into a real workshop style with different people across the organization. I've got a kind of data sheet that you can track and understand and do your analysis. But again, the results have been incredible. We've seen the result of it is the employer branding that's cut time to hire by 75%. Revenues grow by 50%. We've saved thousands in unloved benefits because we're like, well, no one cares about these and we're not investing in them. So why are we spending money in them? All of these things. And I've got, these are my stats from companies I've worked at. You can get these after if you want. But huge impact. And employees, even skeptical employees, love it because it's an opportunity to talk about them.
It's interesting, and I suppose this is going to differ. But having an external consultant like you coming in and doing this work, are they going to get more value and more honesty from that process than trying to do it internally? Now that'll vary from business to business. It's quite interesting. Something that was just cropping up in my brain as you were talking then is I was thinking about a slightly different angle for engagement here. And I'm thinking sort of also peer-to-peer. And I've done quite a lot of work on this in the past and with clients, is that so you've got quite a healthy senior management team. I've had experiences where there's been a lot of horn locking, head butting, between a senior leadership team and in meetings and and in correspondence and whatever else. And something I use in my current practice and also I've used for years, since I've 25 years now, or sort of psychometric testing. And that's something that I've looked to explore, particularly in a team dynamic, because so I had a team and there was 11 in the room in this team. I think 6, 7 of them, were all really high on dominance. And actually I was finding there was a lot of this going on. And it's just because they're very task focused, very dominant. But the problem was that it was causing unrest within the team and actually starting to affect performance. We're having disagreements. I'm then playing agony aunt, agony uncle, to babysit problems because they've had some arguments and things, which is frustrating. But once I'd done this exercise with everyone in the room, so they could, we did a little guessing game. It was like, I want you to guess whose profile this is. And I think people only guessed, 2 were guessed. Other than that, nobody could really work out which ones was whose, which told a story in itself. And by the time we'd gone through that process, And then certain individuals who were locking horns a little bit, it was almost like a bit of a light bulb moment, thinking, right, now I understand why me and you are doing this. It's not actually that we don't like each other. It's just because we're both very high on D, because I use the DISC profile. So I think there's also a consideration for inter-team engagement. And I know I've got off at a slight tangent from the EVP and what you were talking about, just something that come into my mind now.
But also with that though, how much of that then was just recognition of behaviour rather than having to change any behaviour, like, or was it a combination of both?
I wouldn't change any of that team for the world. They were great. They were brilliant. And actually, my D is a sort of moderate to high. So if I need it, I'll use it. But it's not. I try not to. I'm not. My influence is a lot higher than my D. And but none. I looked around the room and said, and it's not about that. It wasn't about you've got to tone your D down. It's just recognise that you've got a high D, and when you talk to that person, when you talk to your teammates, they're also a high D. So just be considerate on how you address certain things, because if you go in like a bull in a china shop, guess what? They're going to come back at you in the same way. So it wasn't about changing behaviours, that particular project. That was more about let's understand each other's behaviours and understand, that our own styles and communication styles are going to potentially antagonize people in different ways. And there was a flip side. There were a couple of support team members in this meeting who were a lot more higher on C, very low on D, I's middle of the road, steady pace, but these were people that we wanted to be compliant, following process, dotting the I's, crossing the T's. But on the receiving end of a big D coming at them would be just wilt, and again, it was just an opportunity for these more dominant characters to understand that you're not going to get the best out of these particular people unless you tone down the way that your D is when you communicate with them. So that's just like I say, I'm off on a slight tangent.
It's good, do you think? Because there's another engagement technique which I love. I wouldn't recommend it if someone isn't doing anything for employee engagement. I wouldn't recommend it as your starter. It's probably more of an advanced level thing to do. But Johari window, I don't know if you've ever done one of those or seen it, but it's an exercise where you get a few people in a room who, whether they're a group of senior leaders or a group of people who have to work together, or who probably know each other more or would need to know each other more and spend more time with each other. And they would bring to the room that all the things they know about themselves and the things that they think people don't know about them. So the things they think they are hidden from other people and that are known.
Yeah.
So already that part of the exercise is you go around the room and you learn something that people think they don't know. And actually you find that people do know some of these things and some of the things they think, they don't. So that's a good start. Why I say this is probably a more advanced thing, that you have to build some trust and some psychological safety before you get to this point. Is the second part of this is the room talk about you and their perception of you. So the things known to others that you don't know necessarily about yourself, which is, again, you have to remember receiving that. Most people want to receive it. They want to receive the criticism, and it's people are polite rather than laying to people, which is why you've got to be careful, because some people do like to lay into people. But I always remind people that session, it's perception. So it may not be true about you, but it's how people perceive you. And if you go around the room, then you find people are open up. But I've been in those where there's been tears and revelations, and it's quite an intense session. So again, it's I wouldn't launch with that. I'd leave with a nice inspiring workshop or something like that before going into something like that.
I think I would agree. I mean, there's a couple of questions I want to come to in a second. The couple of questions, so just bear with me a second. But I think that it's really important that, so for example, you can go down a 360 sort of review and appraisal route of leadership and management. I'm all for it. I wouldn't have been in my early career at all, but I think a leader with a growth mindset, a mature approach to their business, acknowledging that they can still change, adapt, grow, and improve, however long they've been doing the job, to accept some 360 feedback from people, I think is brilliant, because what that also does, and not necessarily going to go down this route in this conversation, but we're starting to get to a point where we're creating more psychological safety for people to feel comfortable to speak out without fear. Am I going to lose my job? Am Am I gonna get treated badly? Is my boss gonna think I'm an arse because I've just actually given some constructive feedback? So that's good. So there's two questions, mate. I'm just going to start with the second one first. George Graham Rose sent it. I really like that question, George. So I'm looking forward to answering that in a second. Darren Brace just asked a question regarding the Johari window, and his question is, how do you gauge how do you gauge when you have enough trust for the exercise to be effective? So you said you don't launch it from day one. So where does it fit in? That's a good question, that.
Yeah, that's over time working with teams and understanding more about them and where they would be on that boat if you were for engagement. I mean, I'll answer this by talking about the anonymous surveys and why I don't like anonymous surveys, because it kind of answers this question. I don't like them because the idea of anonymous surveys is to build psychological safety. But for me, it takes it away, because what happens is you're putting comment and it's being interpreted in a way that you might not mean and not understood. So actions taken based on something you don't really mean, and then you get frustrated with the results, or nothing happens. So then you've just got more disconnect. So that's why I don't like that. So, but that's why I equally would say you wouldn't do a Johari straight away, because to get that understanding of would that room be a trusting environment, you'd need to do more work in terms of, okay, how open are people in conversation? What kind of engagement do we get with other things that we do? What feedback do we get from surveys of any kind that suggests communication isn't necessarily a challenge? Communication skills and listening skills, and like we talk about leaders who are open to growth and change and feedback. Like, have we got leaders who've demonstrated that before? Because if they haven't, then why? So we wouldn't necessarily put them in that environment if we haven't if we haven't experienced that in the workplace. So it's a great question.
And there's an add-on to that before we come to George's. So and does it help having someone external or objective to mediate the session? I'll throw my bit in here. I think it'll vary from business to business. If I was doing this inside a business that I was leading and it was for my team, I would prefer to chair it, but I'd love the experience of someone that was almost our independent person that could be that third eye, could actually be objective and actually challenge people in the room without, with no employment or peer tie at all. Personally, I think that would open up, and they can also observe, how is the leader receiving this feedback? How is everyone actually interacting? And maybe take that away outside of the session, because that could potentially drive some other work and activities that need to happen. That's my view, but what's your thoughts, Joe?
I'll make it easy. I agree. I mean, like, there's a worry we're biased as people who do coaching and consulting and support with this. So we've got two voices, but equally, if it wasn't me, I'd suggest that anyway. So it's some kind of mediation or somebody who has experienced these sessions. I'd even be as far as to say, if somebody's done a Johari before and is taking the lead on that, I think that would work. But yeah, just for all the reasons you said, to have somebody external would help on that.
It's good. I have just an independent witness, isn't it? So cool. Right. So I'm gonna go to George's question. This is a good one. Another good one. I'm conscious of time now. We're at 48 minutes. So I'm going to use George's question as an opportunity for us to maybe start to look at summarising the whole conversation. So whenever I do these LinkedIn lives, I do want people to take. You have to. Anyone listening to this there must be something that's been, even if it's your own thought process that's been created. It might have confirmed your own thoughts. It might have created some thoughts that mean that you can go away and implement or action something off the back of the conversation. That's always like my want and aim. So there's some value for people listening. So George's question, let's do it. So I want some actionable tips off the back of this now. So we'll sort of combine the two. So George, where are we? Where's my cursor? Come here. There we go. Put it on the screen. Okay, George. So question is, what do you both see as the biggest trends shaping employee engagement in the next 3 to 5 years? I'm going to kick in because I've just got something in my head that I'd like to share. I think a massive, massive consideration for engagement and the landscape of employee engagement is it's just shifting quite considerably based on the trends that we're seeing of younger generations coming into business. So the environments that I've worked in I'm 50 in February, so just to give you an idea of how old I am at this point in time, 50 years young in February. So the environment and the cultures that I've grown up in and developed my career in over the years are not going to be fit for purpose for the new generation. And I'll give you an example just to try and echo this point. That is, it's sport business. Is that I forget the football team, but the first team employed what used to be their academy manager into their first team. Raised a few eyebrows. But the reason for it is they were developing a lot of talent through the academy that were making the grade for the first team. And the management style, so if you dropped Alex Ferguson in there and given him a bit of hairdryer treatment, you just ain't going to get a single thing from them. And even though these are high-performing sports people, they have to be dealt and communicated and engaged and managed in a completely different way. There's a softer touch. They don't respond to being told what to do. They want more work-life balance. They want a bit more flexibility. Well-being's up there. Mental health's a big thing, So there's a lot of changes in what people want out of a work environment. So that's my contribution to start with in terms of how that, for me, is probably one of the biggest trends that's going to make employee engagement and management and leadership and all those things is going to sort of force, I think, being adaptable as an employer of people and having your finger on the pulse in terms of this whole engagement piece will be a really important asset, I believe, for businesses as we go through the next few years. That's my first contribution.
Yeah, I mean, following up on that, that's when I talk about EVP, the definition of that is the balance of reward and benefits for the work people put in. So you start to think, is it just giving people what they want for the sake of it? But no, it's a balance for the work they put in. That's the bit. So on that point, with whether it's Gen Z, millennials, whoever who's coming into work, the communication is there is you still have to put in to get what you want. And that's that. If that messaging, I don't think that messaging will go away from business. In fact, it will be a different type of style of communication, but I think the same message will apply. But mine, I think we couldn't get through a podcast, webinar, or whatever without talking about AI. But I'm kind of gambling on this with the business. So I believe that if AI is shifting work and it's going to affect how everybody works, it's going to be a huge benefit to people in terms of enabling them to learn more in different skills. Of course, it's going to negatively impact people in terms of certain roles just won't be available anymore, and the people who won't adapt will struggle. But the impact and the trends on employee engagement and the impact of that in the next 3 to 5 years, as I am gambling on the fact that there will be more need for this human interaction, employee engagement techniques, things that are human, tangible interactions, communication, all of this side and the stuff you do as well. Because I believe that will just become more important to people who are navigating this new AI world.
And you're right. I think AI is ever evolving, flipping amazing stuff, really. So that's good. I think that there's something else I'm just going to drop onto this as well. And this is the whole working from home, hybrid work. It's not gone away. I know there's a lot of mandates of trying to get people back into an office. And I think from an engagement perspective, it probably makes it easier to get the employee engagement right. I think this remote working thing isn't going to go away. It's still going to form part of working conditions for a lot of people. And it's making sure that those people are well and truly form part of that whole employee engagement, and considerations are made for people that are actually working remotely. Because some of the trends that I've seen personally, and I spoke to someone about this yesterday, people who are at home the lifestyle habits and choices might start drifting, drinking a bit more booze. This was a conversation I had with somebody yesterday. Someone was turning up onto calls in the morning looking half cut from the night before, and they had started to drink a lot more because they were at home, didn't need to drive, go in the office, almost get dressed. So there's lots of other things to consider where, whilst there's loads of benefits to remote working, there are cons to it as well. And it's making sure all the work that you do, doing your EVP, doing the work, doing the communication, is be really locked into considerations for people that are working remotely and people that are there at your fingertips, really. So that's what I would add. And
on that as well, like, because I don't really care what businesses decide to do, if they want people in 5 days a week or if they're fully remote. Like, to me, that it becomes the debate when I don't think that really is the debate. It's about how businesses are communicating what they want. Mm-hmm. So again, this goes back to employee engagement. If business is saying you're 5 days a week in the office and this is the way it is, and they make that messaging clear, and then they make the EVP part is why is this attractive to somebody? Why would somebody like this? And do the pros outweigh the cons? Fine. To me, it's when that's not communicated, or when there's the lines are too blurred, or there's no real understanding of what impact that has to employees. And again, that is employee engagement. So whether it's return to work or free fruit or whatever we've spoke about today, it's that way. I don't think that will change. It's just the topics of what we're talking about will change. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm gonna, one more thing, and then I'm gonna.
It's usually me going on. Go on.
No, we can keep going. It's good though, isn't it? You know, like I say, that I hope people get, there's enthusiasm on the conversation. I hope people see that and get something from it. So the last thing for me really is from a leadership perspective is I always remember personally, and seeing it with people that I've developed and worked with in the employment world, is that transition of being in a position that you're managing a team that are all in the same office and the same place as you, to then moving into sort of a regional, remote, national sort of role where people are all dotted here, there, and everywhere. So they're not just knock at the door and go and see them. I've always believed that that's been quite a considerable transition to make from a leadership and managerial perspective. And I think it's just making sure that where you have got remote workers that are not in an office and someone's in a position to lead and manage and engage those people, is that they are adequately supported, trained and developed with the skills that they need to manage people that are remote. Because if you don't get that right, I think it will cause problems, basically. So
that's spot on, because it's employee engagement is not it's not whether you work in the office or not, it's how you manage that. So employee engagement is how you manage that change or those situations or the people that are involved or the stakeholders in each situation. So I guess maybe the answer to the question, what is employee engagement from earlier, is again, how you manage the experience of an employee.
Awesome. That can be a nice, tidy summary. So by way of thanks, I've enjoyed the conversation. I thanks for the people that have contributed and asked questions. I hope you've got some value from it. I will send everyone that's joined and registered for the event, I'll send you a personal note anyway. Any questions, you can fire them into myself or Joe. So my name's Chris Howe, your results coach. I'm on LinkedIn and very active on LinkedIn. Good place to find me. You can always go to my website, which is www.yourresultscoach.co.uk. And if you want to talk to Joe and have a conversation, maybe talk about the work that he does, Joe, how can folk track you down, mate?
Yeah, I'm equally flooding LinkedIn with all my content, but I'm now doing it on the website, cheeratwork.com. So it explains more about EVP, the work I do, workshops, or joe@cheeratwork.com.
Awesome. And that'll do us. And if you do inquire with Joe, just use the code results, please, so we know that it's come from this webinar. Awesome. Right, folks, thank you so much for those that have joined live. If you've watched it on record, thanks again. Fire any questions over, we'll answer them, no problem. And have a great weekend. Take care. Cheers, guys.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
Cheers.